Welcome back to the Citizen channel. Hope you're all staying safe and well. On a part two, so you don't watch part one, go and watch it. Don't be watching part two until you've seen part one. And obviously, a lot of the information's on there as to what criteria we've used for this. Of course, we're talking the player ratings of the 21-22 season. We did a half-yearly one back at the end of December. Interesting certain top five there, but as I said, please watch part one for that information. But we've got in part two now, we've got down to the top 10. Yeah, so we've got who's going to be the top 10, who's going to be our highest rated player for myself, and of course we're including the Manchester Evening News, and mainly Stuart Brennan. Simon Bukowski didn't do many player ratings this season, so it's mainly Stuart Brennan. And we don't always agree. There's some big differences as well in that first half. Please check that out. But yeah, so please, if you do like this, please give us a like. It makes an old City fan very happy. And if you're not subscribed, you can push that subscribe button and tell your friends. It'd be great if you can support me as well. So the guys who didn't qualify, they had to play at least 12 games. That was the cut-off point for me out of the 38 league games. So the guys who haven't qualified were Palmer, Torres, Aki, Zinchenko and Ferner. All had mixed scores, but all scored pretty well. So please check that out in part one. And we counted down in part one from 15 to 11. So at 15, we had, our Algerian fan base, don't shoot me. I had Mahrez at 15. I had Cancelo at 14. I had Sterling at 13. I had Walker at 12. And at number 11, Mr. Edison. Yeah, he was actually number 15 on the Manchester Evening News one. But just check up on that if you get a chance. So we're going to go into the top 10. Excuse me. So my number 10, but the Manchester Evening News 14, so he didn't do very well. And another big surprise. We've had 2 or 3 big surprises already in the bottom 5 of this group. Aymeric Laporte at number 10. 14 with the Manchester Evening News, certainly a bit of a surprise. And it was no change. That's what he was back in end of December when I did my half-yearly one after 19 games. So he was exactly the same spot for me, and he was exactly the same spot for the Manchester Evening News. So no change from that time, second half of the season. My score for him is 6.88. The Manchester Evening News is 6.59. Yeah, I think most have said this season he's always got a mistake in him, but he's not alone there, is he? No one's sort of without that probability of making a mistake for City. His distribution is still excellent going forward, and let's face it, Pep likes him. Pep likes him and Diaz. That's our centre half partnership. And that's the favoured centre-backs. And I don't expect anything different to continue as long as they're fit next season, into the next season either. He made 33 appearances, so he played a hell of a lot of games. His best 2 were Wolves away recently, of course, and way back in time, Chelsea at home, 1-0. Remember that one? Not long into the season, that was. So that's, Mr. Aymeric Laporte. Very interesting. Number 10, very surprised. Well, what about number 9? You're surprised that who's at number 10. What about number 9? Number 12 for the Manchester Evening News, Ruben Diaz, number 9. Another that actually dropped down my ratings from the first half of the season and the Manchester Evening News ratings. 6 places it dropped in the Manchester Evening News. Obviously, he was up in 6, and he dropped 4 for me, so he was up in that 5th spot in my ratings at the halfway point. 27 appearances, and certainly, a big miss. Any time he wasn't there, a big miss for the last 3 games, of course, of this season. Our leader, and that's what he is. But he's been caught out a little bit, hasn't he? But he still remains our main man. But obviously, he wasn't that perfect. In the same way, Laporte had a mistake in him. Ruben Diaz wasn't always perfect, was he? I think personally, he's a better player, and he's better at centre half if John Stones is by his side. But as I stated before, Pep doesn't like that. Pep doesn't think so. He thinks Laporte and Diaz is the way to go. Who are we to argue? He scores, Ruben Diaz, 6.96, so just under 7 from me, and 6.74 of the Manchester Evening News. He's probably low light of the season with Spurs at home. Again, he wasn't alone in that one, was he? But at home in the 3-2 loss, of course. And we have to go back to Villa away for possibly his best game of the season. And in 8th spot, here we go. This is interesting. There's a big difference between me and the M.E.N on this one. So, in 8th spot and in 4th on the Manchester Evening News. So in the top 5, but my number 8 is Gundogan. Top 5 for them, but has moved up the tail for both of us. So we've improved the second half of the season for me and the Manchester Evening News. I rated him again just under 7 at 6.97, but the Manchester Evening News, he got an average rating of 7.16. 19 appearances. I think Gundogan, more than anybody else, well, not more, probably like people like Bernardo, suffers a little bit because of the way he's asked to do different jobs in different games. It doesn't, we can see how dangerous he can be in the box when we played against Villa in the final game of the season, of course. Of course, we can see that. But he tends otherwise to play him like double pivot with Rodri and stuff like that, or him as a DM himself and stuff like this. So, yeah, he does suffer from not having that regular. I think Gundogan is far more lethal up near in the box. I think he's more clinical. He seems to know when to go for things and when not to go for things. And we do miss that at times when he's asked to do another job. And that's what Pep does. He shuffles around and asks for players to do different jobs. He doesn't always play in a position where he can be that dangerous that he was against Villa. I say, even then he came on as substitute and did it, didn't he? A supposed bad back recently that sort of reared its head last 3 or 4 weeks. Certainly didn't affect his end of season performances and his recent marriage. He's just got married, so he's a happy bunny, I think. He said himself, I think he's got 1 more year on his contract, I think I'm right in saying that. So, what is it? Is it going to be a sneaky? Is it going to be a sneaky bid from someone and he might desert us, or City will take the money, or are we just going to enjoy his contribution for 1 more season? We'll have to see. One of his lows was a 1-0 away victory at Everton, but he had a particularly poor game. A couple of the highs were the Arsenal home game, a 5-0 win, way back in time, you remember that one. And another 5-0 Newcastle at home as well. That's one of his better games. Say the Villa game, he was my man of the match, but because he was a substitute, it doesn't count, so he misses out on that. But so he's my number 8. And he's the Manchester Evening News number 4. So that's that. Another player now in at number 7. He's my number 7, and he's the Manchester Evening News 7 as well. Another one that surprised me. A lot of people have been raving over him this season, and I don't disagree. I think he's had a great season. We're talking Rodri, of course. He was in the top 5 at number 3 for both me and the Manchester Evening News at the halfway stage. So he's actually deteriorated. He's actually gone worse in the second half of the season. He sort of slipped from game 20. It sort of just went downhill just a little bit. He's still been playing well, but not quite. He was more effective in the first half of the season. Made 33 appearances, so he's been a busy lad. But he's not quite matched his first half of the season performances in the second half. I've scored him overall. He's my first player to get over 7.06. And the Manchester Evening News just under 7 at 6.97. He appears to have made that position his own, but oddly people are now, because Fern has gone, are asking for a solid replacement like Declan Rice or Calvin Phillips. But do you see any of those guys coming in to be second fiddle to Rodri? All right, might make Rodri raise his game if they're there, but will they want to be playing every week, or they'd be willing to do that? It'd be very, very interesting. I mean, personally, because he's not very injury prone, he plays a lot of games, of course, Rodri. He's a fit lad, he doesn't get injured. I sort of thought cover next season, if we didn't end up with a Phillips, or we didn't end up with a Declan Rice, if you like, perhaps because of money, we can only spend what we've got, unlike what other people think, and some idiots think we've got a bucket full of money, a pot that just goes on forever. We haven't. So if we can't do that, I mean, Lavia is perhaps is a bit too young yet to do it, but I think Gundogan, and obviously I always think Stones is earmarked for a sort of DM role at some stage. So if Rodri's going to play a lot of the games anyway, because he's a physically fit lad, will they take that chance of actually bringing someone else in, or just stick with what we've got? It'd be very interesting to see. Again, it'll all based on what we're going to do during the summer transfer window, of course. Very consistent all season with his ratings. His low points, again, he's not alone in this one, with Spurs at home, the 3-2 defeat, of course, and another game that's quite popular as a low point, even though we won it, was Everton away around Christmas time. Highlights early in the season was a 1-0 home win against Chelsea again, which we has cropped up before, and of course the United away match as well, which we won 2-0. So that was an interesting, Rodri. So it's into 7th spot for both myself and the Manchester Evening News. Right, into the top 6, my 6th place guy. And 10, yeah, place 10 on the Manchester Evening News. The guy I sort of squirrels into this. I fiddled the figures a little bit to make sure he got in it. And of course, I'm talking John Stones, who managed 12 appearances, of course, in total. Had only managed 4 starts in the first 19 home games, first 19 league games. So, yeah, he managed to get a few more in, and obviously he had a bit of a problem towards the end of the season again, didn't he? But yeah, the Manchester Evening News didn't position or rate him as highly as me in the first half of the season. But we got there in the end, and we got at this point 7.12 he averaged for the whole season, for the 12 games. For the Manchester Evening News, just 6.83, so a lot lower. So that's why there's a big difference between me and them. When fit, when he was fit, I thought, as I said, for me, it's Stones and Diaz all day long. But Pep doesn't think that. So when he was fit, he was missing lots of games, and then when he got the opportunity to play, he got injured again. That's always going to be a problem with Stones. He's not 100% fit all the time, is he? So he does get a good run, and he gets a niggling injury, and then it's back to square one again. He's not a right back, Pep, so please don't play him as a right back again. But as I said, I think Pep one day could give him that DM role as well. I think he could do that role. His fitness is going to be a problem, as I said. His standout game was probably the recent win over Brighton, the 3-0 win over Brighton. Significantly, there was no real low moments or poor games for John Stones in the games he's played. Right, only 12, but yeah. So for me, he should have played a lot more than he did. So that he's in 6th place. So my number 5 in my 5th place, yes, and he's dropped a little bit from the first half of the season. In 5th place for me and 3rd for the Manchester Evening News. So he's still rated quite highly. He was there number 1 though at halfway stage. Yes, we're talking Jack Grealish, of course, who's been getting a lot of stick, of course. And this will surprise many, but hopefully not surprise a lot of you. He was my number 2 at the halfway stage. So me and the Manchester Evening News weren't far out on what we thought. He's dropped down a little bit, just a little bit, so he's deteriorated, and he's not perhaps has had as many games either in the second half of the season, but still a very useful first season, despite a lot of people saying to the contrary, not just opposing fans who are and the media, but City fans as well. I've heard say it. He started 22 games, which wasn't too bad, more than I thought he'd had, but he's only started 10 in the last 19. And his average score, 7.14 for me and 7.22 for the Manchester Evening News. I mean, I have defended, as I said, Grealish all season. It's been hard for him considering it's been his first year. I think he's done really, really well. I always thought Pep fancied him as a false 9. Of course, with the arrival of Alvarez and, of course, the imminent arrival of Haaland, I think it's pronounced, isn't it? Of Haaland, things may change, but we don't know who's going to leave. There may be departures as well up front. So potentially people like Jesus, Sterling could be going. And who knows, Mahrez. It might be a surprise. So perhaps next season he will be allowed. It's with that second season where he's been with Pep, he knows a little bit more and he could shine more. But I've been quite impressed with him this season. I'm not going to have a down on him anyway. I thought he's played well this season. Into number 4. Yes, number 4 for me. Might be a surprise. Number 6 on the M.E.N, Manchester Evening News. Jesus, yes, certainly moved up the ranks in the second half of the season. Possibly on his way out, if you'll know the rumours. He might even be out now as you watch, whenever you're watching this. I'm recording this on the 24th of May. He's been one of the most improved players in the second half of the season. 21 appearances in total, which is more than, again, a bit more than I thought he had been. And he's been appreciated a little bit more during this running, I think, than he was earlier in the season. He's never been an out-and-out striker. He's never been an Aguero. Of course he hasn't. But no one can ever doubt his commitment to the cause, and he can score some superb goals, and he can miss some. You think, how did he miss that? And that's just how it is, and that's how it always will be. But he does still score goals. 7.17 for me, 7.09 for the Manchester Evening News. Was on fire. Yeah, he was on fire for our second and third games of the season against Norwich and Arsenal, but then never quite hit the heights after that until Watford home. He got with a 5-1 victory, of course. He was pretty good in that, and West Ham away as well. He played very well in that, despite a slight disappointment. And again, similar to the player before, no real low points, just consistent, and that's 21 appearances, so that's not bad. There's no real bad games. It was consistent without being overly spectacular. So I say, but I personally, I don't want Jesus to go, but I think the writing might be on the wall and he might be on his way. But I hope we make sure we get the right money for him, from my point of view, because I think he's a great player. Right, into my top three. So who have we got left I've not mentioned yet, guys? You probably know. But in the top three, yeah, and number 5 with the Manchester Evening News, so not as highly rated as me. Bernardo, my namesake, yeah, a bit of a drop off from my number 1. Don't forget he was my number 1 up to the halfway mark. And Manchester Evening News had him as number 2, and he's dropped down to number 5 then with him. But still up there, still a big question mark over his future, of course. He went quiet, he knuckled down, he got on with his job, but another one who could, be no surprise if he left us in the summer, if we get a decent offer. Like, just, I'm not going to let him, I think that's the thing, that people are willing to pay the money for a cracking player. And again, like Gundogan suffers by the way Pep plays him. He doesn't always play him in his best position. He sort of likes to, because of his commitment and his workmanlike attitude, he plays him in different positions as well, as a ball carrier from defence sometimes. And that's what he's done. So I think he's suffered like Gundogan has, as far as getting regular games in a regular position is concerned. But there's no doubt his commitment to the cause. If he does go, it'll be a great big loss. But I say, hopefully, or we're not going to let him go surely, unless he's really unhappy. But we need money, don't we? We need money for such a quality player, because he's another player who could come back and hurt us in the future, because he's got plenty of time left. So we're not going to let him go cheaply, surely. 7.23 for me, 7.12 for the Manchester Evening News. He was almost averaging 8, just under 8 out of 10 in the first 19 games. That's why he was up the top for me in the Manchester Evening News, but obviously that dipped just a little bit in the second half of the season. 34 appearances, again, a massive amount of games. Third highest of the City players, including Ederson. His poorest game, where we could have probably needed a little bit of magic, was his poorest outing, and that was, of course, I was there that night, Selhurst Park, Palace away, 0-0. We could have done with a little bit of Bernardo magic that night. He just wouldn't go in, would it? His best game and man of the match performance, because I think there was a stage where they played about 8 games with man of the match, and about 5 of them, I think, if I remember rightly, mainly before Christmas, and then he came back into it a little bit April and early May time this season, this year as well. His standouts: United away in the 2-0, Watford away in the 3-1, and of course Villa away with that wonder goal contribution. So yeah, great stuff from Bernardo. So that brings us to the top 2, or my top 2. And well, I didn't know it'd pan out like this, and I certainly didn't expect this to happen after the first half of the season. But yeah, in corresponding with the young player of the season for the football, for the FA, we've got, the Premier League, we've got Phil Foden in at my number 2. Phil Foden. And guess where he is at Manchester Evening News? He's there, number 1. Yeah, who we're not mentioned yet, but he's the Manchester Evening News number 1 is Phil Foden. He's actually my number 2. And he's sat in 4th early doors, but a great second half of the season. Has sort of took him to the Manchester Evening News number 1, that's for sure. 23 appearances, so not overly played. I never personally got a wow factor with Phil this season, but a great contribution in his appearances. Always capable of something special, of course he was. 7.26 was my average. 7.43 was the Manchester Evening News average. And like many, his worst performance was possibly the Spurs at home game. His highlight, perhaps a couple of highlights. The 2-2 at Liverpool, superb. Leeds at home, 7-0. He was great in that. And if you remember, Liverpool at home, and again in the 2-2 draw, it was excellent. And Wolves away as well. So a few highlights. Of course, this lad's not going anywhere. No one's going to come in and bid money for Phil Foden, because who's going to prize him away? Why would he want? No one's even going to bother asking. He's only 21. Just turned 21, still not being overplayed. So there's so much more to come. Ballon d'Or and things like this, not that I'm into them sort of awards, but yeah, he's there, isn't he? So my number 2 and the Manchester Evening News number 1, Phil Foden, quite rightly. So that leaves us one, doesn't it, guys? That only leaves us one player that I've not mentioned. And I mean, a big surprise, because this guy wasn't really pulling up trees, and we found out a reason for that, of course, in the first half of the season. KDB, of course. Sits number 2 in the Manchester Evening News ratings, though, guys. So I've got him as number 1, the FA's Player of the Year or Premier League Player of the Year, and City Player of the Year as well now, isn't he, of course, as well. So I got him as number 1. Manchester Evening News have got him as number 2. And the biggest mover, definitely the biggest mover from the first half of the season to the second half of the season. We knew he was struggling. He's told us about his struggles first half of the season with playing through the pain just to play the games. He sat 7th. Yeah, he was 7th in my ratings, so about halfway at the halfway stage. And an incredible 12th. So, I mean, it's no wonder he only finished second with Manchester Evening News. He actually hasn't been 12th spot the first half of the season. But so an incredible turnaround from Kevin. You can see the difference it's made, having sorted his problems out, and you can see it from his attitude, from his persona, what he's saying. And my score, and my highest score for any of the players this season, 7.46 was average score. Manchester Evening News 7.29, so not quite as good. And some remarkable scores to turn this round in the second half. Some high ratings consistently. He's got 3 years left on his contract. He's not going anywhere, he said. But we'll try and squeeze another 1 or 2 out of him. He'll probably might go somewhere else at that stage. But another 3 years will do for me, as long as he plays. He did the last half of the season anyway. His part in the 7-0 thrashing of Leeds was standout, sublime. Also, possibly United at home in March was a really big game where he started to consistently then start posting good scores, and games from April to early May. He was on fire in the league, though not quite at it the last couple of games, but still good enough to play a killer pass in the important Villa game, wasn't it? But not quite as lethal as he has been. We won't talk about the Champions League final. We're talking the Premier League today. We won't talk about that. So there you go. So he virtually won the game at Wolves, of course. That has to be his pinnacle. I think got a 10 out of 10 from Stuart Brennan for that one. I didn't quite give him that much. But he just won that game on its own when we needed to win it. A great game and a great second half of the season to get my top spot, my player ratings, Player of the Year, and Manchester Evening News second. Manchester Evening News is Phil Foden, of course. And I can't really give you a bad game with Kevin, even when he was not feeling right, even when he was carrying that little injury, or niggle. We call them niggles, don't we? I didn't really find a game he played badly in. So Kevin De Bruyne, number 1, a worthy winner. So there you have it, guys. So there you go. The final figures from 15 down. 15 Mahrez, 14 Cancelo, 13 Sterling, 12 Walker, 11 Edison, 10 Laporte, 9 Diaz, 8 Gundo, 7 Rodri, 6 Stones, 5 Grealish, 4 Jesus, 3 Bernardo, 2 Foden, and of course, never in doubt, KDB. But what a recovery in the first half of the season. But we know there are reasons for it. So there you go, a few surprises. Let me know what you thought. Hope you enjoyed that. I expected perhaps Walker and Cancelo to rate a bit higher, and Laporte and Diaz as well. I expected them to be a little bit further up. But let me know your top 5 anyway, guys. Let me know what you think, what your top 5 is. I'm thinking KDB will be most people's, won't he? But there you go. You let me know, please. I'd love to hear from you. And hope you enjoy these two parts of the player ratings show for the 21-22 season, as far as the Premier League is concerned, anyway. I've done the FA Cup and the Champions League, but so seek them out. I'll put it on the links anyway. Anyway, thanks for joining me, guys. We're going to do rest day. Have a great one, and please, I only ask you and your family, don't have to do one thing, just stay safe. Come on, City. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.